All right, this says day 4, and in class it was day 4 because we spent a day doing some work. But this is video number 3, so you can call it day 3 if you want. Complex numbers. We'll actually get to finish everything, so I'm kind of excited. Recap, I is squared negative 1, I squared is negative 1. Dividing complex numbers. We've added and subtracted and multiplied, now we divide. This is actually something that won't work in the calculator. If you just try and plug it in, it gives you an error. There is a way to plug it in the calculator, but honestly, it's just easier to kind of do it by hand. Our issue is we can't really divide by this I. Like, it definitely doesn't like it in fraction form, and so we're trying to divide by I. And really, we got to get rid of this I. This I needs to come out of the denominator. Once we can do that, then we can find our right answer. So I asked my kids, you know, what can we do to this and not really change anything? Like, what can we do to it and not change anything? Well, and they were like, well, if we do kind of the same thing to both top and bottom, it doesn't really change it, but it could change it. And I said, that's perfect, actually. So we multiply top and bottom. And I said, what do we multiply by to where it doesn't change? So if we multiply by 1, nothing changes. So that's perfect. So I said, let me ask a couple questions. 3 times 1, well, that's 3. Negative 7 times 1, negative 7. 2x times 1, took them a little bit longer. 2x. I said, okay, 7 times 2 over 2. Well, and then I was like, well, 2 over 2 is just 1. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So 7 times 1 is 7. So negative 3 times x over x. And they were like, negative 3x and stuff like that. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. 2 over 2 is just 1. X over x, that's also 1, right? They're like, oh, I guess that makes sense. So negative 3 times x over x, so it's just going to be negative 3. I said we can even get super complicated. 4 times 3y minus 2 over 3y minus 2. Well, this just equals 1. And we get our answer. So that's still just 4. I said, fantastic. That's what we're going to do. That and a combination of this should look familiar. It's on the second video, I think. Video number 2. Between multiplying by 1 and using something like this, where we get this difference of squares effect, we'll be able to actually get rid of I. Because when we did this, when we had something like this, I was gone completely. And so perhaps I can multiply by something that's not going to actually change it, but when I FOIL, I can disappear. Well, that's called the conjugate. And conjugate's got a fancy name, but I told them, I was like, look, you look at the denominator, and you can use the opposite plus or minus sign. You don't want to change anything else. You don't want to make this negative 3 or anything like that. So I said we got 6 plus I on bottom, so I need, 3 plus 6i on bottom, so I need 3 minus 6i on bottom. In order to not change anything, top and bottom got to be the same, because that's just multiplied by 1. We'll take the bottom and FOIL it and get all the way down to 45. I'm going to take the top, and this is just distributing, and I got this over here in green. I squared became negative 1. Negative 1 times negative 12 is positive 12. So it actually kind of rearranged what I was looking at. So I had 12 plus 6i over 45. 90% of the time you're done, but because these 3 numbers can all be divided by the same thing, divide them all by 3 and get my final answer. The hardest part on this is kind of knowing where to start. So we're going to look at the bottom and change that sign in the middle. Use that top and bottom, multiplying by 1, and it'll work. And again, I'm going to go kind of fast because we got a lot to go over, but just press pause if you need to. 1 minus I, we're going to use 1 plus I. FOIL them together. The i's in the middle cancel. I squared becomes negative 1. The negative 1 is positive 1. 1 plus 1, 2 on bottom. On top, it's just FOILing. FOIL, FOIL, FOIL. Middle terms combine. I squared becomes negative 1, combines. We get that final answer. All right, so I don't know if you saw, uh, time warp a little bit. I kind of lost where I was on this. Um, I think we had this all done because I talked about those three all being divided by 3. Now we're here, 1 minus I and 1 plus I cancel. I think this is about where I was. And on top, we just FOIL and combine. I squared becomes -1, and we're good. Man, I'm really sorry, and I didn't want to start this video over. So here's just another example. Same thing, 2 minus 3I became 2 plus 3I. So if you want to pause and write this one down. This one was a little bit different. Because we don't have a something plus or something minus on bottom. So one of my kids was like, well, if I just use -5I over -5I, I get -25I squared. I squared becomes -1. So I have 25 on bottom. I said, fantastic. But do we really need the -5? Because our goal is to get this I squared. I squared becomes -1 and it's gone. So do we really need the 5? He's like, I guess not. I said, well, let's try it. Here's I over I, because we still need the I. We need to get I squared. So I times I is I squared. Now that becomes -5, a little bit distributing on top, and we're here. I said, but if we did it your way, we'd get this on top, and that would become +5, and all of these have to divide by 4, and we get this. And they look kind of, but they got different signs. So what happened? Well, technically, from here to here, we divided by 5. If we would have divided by -5, we would have gotten this. Generally, the answer shows up with the positive on bottom, generally. But if you did this, I wouldn't be too terribly mad. Just be on the lookout. If you don't see this answer in like a multiple choice, just change all the signs. It's probably there. Then I gave him this. Ooh, but I didn't cover it up. So pause real quick, try it out. Hopefully you're unpaused because I'm going to show you in 3, 2, 1. This is what I got. It originally had 28, 42, and 52, but because all of them could be divided by 2, you got that. That's your final answer. Yeah, these aren't bad. Just you got to know how to find your conjugate. Hopefully you used 4 minus 6i. Don't use a negative. We're not changing any sign in front. No -4 or whatever. And make sure you're not using another 4 plus 6i. But that's how you find your conjugates. So this lesson wasn't too terribly bad. And just make sure you remember how to FOIL. Go back to video 2. Make sure you got your foiling down. And you'll be in pretty good shape.